3.
There's been a lot of argument about the application of the Special Powers Act in cases like this. I don't see it myself.
Section 8 is perfectly clear.
I'm merely warning you. The defence may try and hold things up.
I'll ask to be back at base by 5. I may ask you to adjourn about 4, Mr. President.
I'll rule him out of order if he tries it. May I have my gun back, Carter, please? Thank you. I just thought I'd mention it. Yes?
The court's ready when you are, Mr. President.
Good. Mrs. Rudd?
Nearly.
Major?
Ready, sir. Just get my books.
Good morning,
Mr. Frederick.
Mrs. Rudd, Mr. President, Major.
Mr. Frederick, we weren't expecting you.
Well, I just thought I'd pop in and let you know I was here. You know me, I shan't get in the way, but I thought I'd better let you know.
It'll be a pleasure to have you sit with us, Mr. Frederick.
Well, that's very kind of you. It's a lovely morning. It's a pity to be shut up in court all day. Still, can't be helped if they will do these things.
Thank you, Carney.
Isn't this a bit out of your line of country, sir?
To open and shut, is that what you're thinking? No. No, not at all.
Just not your line of country?
Well, what isn't nowadays? Still, I mustn't keep you.
Lehman,
Sir?
put up the prisoner.
Very well, sir.
What's Mr. Frederick doing here, President? We haven't been stepping out of line lately, have we?
Oh, he does this from time to time, you know, just drops in, keeps you on your toes.
I've never known him drop in without a reason, Mr. President. Never.
He may have his reasons, Major Burney. Who are we to know the mind of the ministry? Anyway, don't let it put you off. It's an open and shut case from what I read. Let's get on and try it. Major?
The upstanding in court. Be seated.
The state against Benjamin Robert Sadler. Contrary to the provisions of the Sabotage Act Section 12 and the Homicide Act Section 3 and 4, under the provisions of the Special Powers Act, Benjamin Robert Sadler is charged with homicide during the performance of an act of sabotage against a state property, namely the Merton Reservoir near Stackpool. Benjamin Robert Sadler, how do you plead?
Mr. President,
Mr. James?
before my client pleads, Mr. President, I wish to raise a question of jurisdiction.
Mr. James, if your client doesn't plead, you have no status in front of us, and I'm afraid I cannot hear you.
And, Mr. President, I'm placed in an impossible situation from the start. If I allow my client to plead, I accept by implication the jurisdiction of the court. If I do not allow him to plead, I have no status.
Section 8, Mr. James. If you deny the court's right to try your client, then you automatically deny yourself the right to speak in his behalf.
Mr.
You
President,
can't have it both ways.
Mr. President, Section 8 itself is in direct violation of all the rules of natural justice.
I was not aware, Mr. James, that justice was one of the attributes of nature. I've always believed it to be an invention of man.
As is Section 8, Mr. James.
As the court pleases.
Benjamin Robert Sadler, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Mr. Gordon?
Mr. President, members of the tribunal, the prisoner is charged in that he did, in the furtherance of an act of sabotage, willfully murder or cause by his culpable action the death of one Albert Goodman, a security guard at a reservoir. Now, I do not propose to waste the court's time by giving you an account of the facts myself. With your permission, I shall call my first witness.
Please.
Call Derek Shelton.
Call Derek Shelton.
Pass.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I so swear.
And tell the court who you are.
Derek Shelton, Reservoir Houses, Stackpool, Essex.
Now, I want you to tell the court in your own words what happened on the night of June the 13th last.
May I consult my notebook, please, sir?
Give him his notebook.
Do you identify this notebook?
Yes, sir. This is my notebook. It contains notes taken by me on the 14th of June last.
A plan has been produced for the convenience of the court. With your permission, I shall now produce it.
Certainly.
Usher. Now, Mr. Shelton, tell the court what happened, please.
Well, I'm a guard at this reservoir, sir, and, well, I was on duty.
Speak up, Mr. Shelton.
I was on duty on the night of the 13th and 14th of June last year. At about 1:45 in the morning, I and Albert Goodman, who was on duty with me, heard a slight noise coming from the perimeter fence.
And where precisely were you situated when you heard the noise?
Over by the main building here, sir.
And from which part of the fence did the noise come?
Well, it appeared to be coming from over here. In any event, I went to investigate, and when I got there, I found that the electric wire had been bypassed and cut, and a gap big enough for someone to have entered without actually setting off the alarm. Well, I called out to Goodman.
Who was still?
Over at the main building, sir. And he ran round here to switch on the lights. The switches are situated inside this doorway here. Well, when the lights came on, we saw a figure wearing dark clothing with a black hood pulled over his head, running towards the fluoridization plant. It's over here, next to the reservoir. Well, Goodman called out for him to stop, but he ignored the warning, so Goodman fired a single shot over his head. This had no effect except to make the figure run faster. And it was then that a rifle shot extinguished one of the flood lamps.
In which flood lamp?
It'll be this one here, sir. The others are concealed behind the corner of the building, or they just weren't facing in the right direction.
How do you mean, in the right direction?
Well, for whoever was firing the rifle, sir, they were shooting from beyond the perimeter fence.
Now, what effect did the shooting out of this single lamp have?
Well, the ground all around the fluoridization plant was now in a heavy shadow.
And could you still see the figure?
No, sir, but we could hear noises coming from inside the plant.
I see. Go on.
Well, Goodman and I approached the building, and he went inside. I stayed outside. That was to prevent anyone from escaping.
Now, did the person outside the fence shoot at either you or Mr. Goodman?
No, I don't think so, sir. He fired a couple more shots at the lamps, but as I said, they were concealed behind the corner of the main building. And the noise of the shooting by this time had brought the rest of the guards out, and some of them made off around the perimeter road to try and locate the person firing the rifle. And shortly after this, the hooded figure emerged from the doorway of the plant. He ran a few places, shouted something, then threw himself flat on the ground, and at that moment there was an explosion from inside the plant. Well, I then approached and apprehended the person.
Now, do you see that person in this courtroom today?
Yes, sir. I identify that man.
Go on.
Well, as soon as the person was securely held by some of the other guards who joined me by this time, I entered the building and found considerable damage had been done by what later proved to be a hand grenade. Goodman, he was lying dead on the floor close to the center of the explosion. But the plant was still functioning, and it was subsequently ascertained that, apart from Goodman, nothing seemed to have suffered much damage.
Considerable damage, or not much damage, Mr. Shelton. Which?
Well, it appeared considerable, sir, when I first entered the building, but when I'd had the opportunity to examine the machinery, I found it was all still functioning.
And then?
Well, I then caused the prisoner to be brought into the plant and showed him the body of Goodman. He said, "It's his own fault. I told him to keep clear." I asked him if he was responsible for Goodman's death, and he said, "Not just me, there's plenty more where I come from. I'm sorry about you, mate, but it was his own fault." I remonstrated with him for what he'd done, and it was then that he said, "You'll be next if you don't watch it. There's a war on, you know, and if you take my advice, you'll get out of the front line before you get hurt too." Well, the police arrived shortly afterwards, sir, and I transferred the prisoner to their custody.
Now, have you any doubt in your own mind that the Prisoner caused the explosion?
None at all, sir.
Or that had he not thrown the hand grenade, Goodman would be alive today?
No, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. President, is it not somewhat irregular that this tribunal is trying my client for murder when there has been no evidence as yet of anybody having died?
I would have thought that Mr. Shelton's evidence could suffice for that purpose, Mr. James.
Mr. President, Mr. Shelton is a guard on duty at the reservoir. He's not a doctor nor a pathologist. It may be his opinion that the other guard, Goodman, was killed in an explosion from a hand grenade. But before I examine him, I would like to be absolutely certain, and I would like the court to be certain, that we are involved in a case of murder, and that the dead man, if indeed there is a dead man, was actually killed in an explosion.
Mr. James, we would hardly be here today were we not quite certain that there had been a death, and that that death had been caused by an explosion in the reservoir at which your client was arrested.
Mr. President, mistakes can be made. Cause of death is not something to be established by the unprofessional opinions of witnesses such as Mr. Shelton.
Very well, Mr. James, if you wish to waste the tribunal's time. We will now hear the evidence of the technical witnesses. In the meantime, Mr. Shelton, you may stand down.
Look at this. And this. And this. And that one. What are you doing about it?
The police are reporting, sir.
The police are responsible to you, Mr. Frederick. You can't just sit back and let them get on with it.
The actual investigation of a bomb attack of this kind, sir, is best left in their hands. My job is to coordinate.
Coordinate? Mr. Frederick, we have a revolution on our hands.
There were 5 incidents in 5 different cities during the night, sir. That means no more than that there are 5 groups of dissidents at work in 5 different places. Hardly a revolution, sir.
The makings of one. And so far the terrorists seem able to outguess you in everything you do.
I don't mind readers, sir. They're lucky. And they don't outguess me all the time.
Far, far too often. I know you have a difficult job to do, but it is time we started getting some results.
I'd be grateful if you'd let me get results my own way, sir. I can quite easily go out and arrest 20 or 30 known suspects and organize you a show trial.
Well, why don't you?
All that would do is drive the movement even further underground and make it more difficult to contain.
But you are not containing it.
Minister, if your colleagues in the cabinet want impressive statistics, large numbers arrested, then I would suggest my department is not the right one for the job. If you want the ringleaders exposed, if you want the nonsense to stop, then let me do it my way.
So long as you are aware of the urgency of the situation.
I am, sir.
How's the trial going?
As expected, sir, the boy will be found guilty today.
Now, that's the sort of thing I mean. My colleagues would rather see you out in the field than sitting in a court listening to evidence in an open and shut case like this.
Open, sir, not shut by any means.
Very well. I suppose you know best.
Will that be all, sir?
Yes, yes. I shall want a report.
You shall have one, sir, after I've heard the evidence in mitigation.
Mitigation? There can be no mitigation for acts of terrorism which cause this kind of appalling tragedy.
Absolutely not, sir.
You appreciate, Mr. Shelton, that you are still under oath?
I do, sir.
Mr. James?
Where did you say the explosion took place, Mr. Shelton?
Inside the fluoridization plant, sir.
And what is the function of that plant?
It pumps the fluoride into the water.
Just fluoride?
Yes, sir.
Are you sure of that, Mr. Shelton?
Yes, sir.
What would you say if I were to produce evidence that other substances are being pumped into the water besides fluoride?
Well,
Mr. James, I'm not quite sure that I understand your line of questioning.
I'm going to contend, Mr. President, that this plant serves a different function from that indicated by its name.
And how does that affect the facts as related by this witness?
It directly affects the motives for my client's actions.
Motives are not the concern of this court, Mr. James. We're dealing with facts. If you wish to question the witness on the facts, you may proceed.
It is my case that my client was justified in carrying out his attack on the plant because the substances being pumped into the water are harmful.
So your client is prepared to admit to the attack?
On the grounds that it was justified, yes, Mr. President.
Then there seems to be nothing else for us to do. On the basis of the evidence which we've heard, there's no question of doubt that Goodman died as the direct result of an explosion caused by your client, who is guilty of murder in the furtherance of an act of sabotage.
Is the court not prepared to allow him to defend himself?
Mr. James, your client admits the facts. There would seem to be no need to hear further evidence for the prosecution. You may stand down, Mr. Shelton.
But does the court no longer recognize a defense of justifiable homicide?
I don't see how you can make such a plea in this case, Mr. James.
If the act of sabotage can be justified as being in the public interest...
Sabotage in the public interest?
If the sabotage were intended to remove or destroy something that was operating to the public harm, yes.
Mr. James, Excuse me a moment. What is happening?
No, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. James, it is no defence before this court to maintain that fluoride in the water is harming the public.
I did not say just fluoride, Mr. President.
Sit down, Mr. James. Whatever delusions may be afflicting your client, unless you are prepared to argue that he's insane, cannot possibly be of interest to this tribunal. The court is adjourned for 10 minutes.
The upstanding in court.
Is there something wrong, sir?
No, no, no. No, it seems to be going very much as I expected. Won't you sit down?
Then why the adjournment?
I wanted your advice on one aspect of the case.
Advice?
Well, it's already obvious that Sadler has no defense to the facts and is guilty as charged. That leaves you with no alternative but to sentence him. How do you intend to proceed?
Section 8.
Well, Section 8 leaves you very little room for maneuver. You find him guilty, then what?
The sentence is mandatory. We aren't left any choice.
Were you intending to hear evidence in mitigation?
Mitigation in a case like this?
Is that what you want us to do, Mr. Frederick?
No, don't misunderstand me. I don't want to interfere in any way. I merely wish to ascertain whether you intended hearing mitigating evidence before passing sentence.
But if the sentence is mandatory...
It would be very helpful to me to hear the mitigation.
You want us to?
Not that it would make any difference to the sentence, but there is room, if you examine Section 9, to put in a recommendation for mercy. You may not wish to do so, but at least the possibility exists.
If you want us to.
Well, it really is not for me to advise you.
Well, I could ask Mr. James to persuade his client to change his plea to guilty. That way we could hear mitigation under Section 9.
Well, that sounds like an admirable suggestion.
I really should get back to this.
Don't worry, Major. Should the case run on, I've made arrangements to have you covered. You can stay as late as you like.
You have?
Let's hope it won't be necessary.
Is there anyone you particularly want us to hear?
No, please proceed exactly as though I were not here.
I said before we started that you never come to court without a reason, Mr. Frederick. Why not tell us?
Let me put it this way. Sadler disappeared some weeks before he turned up at the reservoir. A youth employment officer reported him missing. Naturally, we had his house watched. Now, it's already obvious from the evidence that Sadler could not have been operating on his own. Clearly, then, he made contact with a number of accomplices whilst he was missing. It seems equally likely that one or more of those accomplices was known to him before he disappeared. Well, that's all there is.
I'm sorry. I still don't see how this hearing is
my
affected.
word, Major Burney. I would like to hear the evidence.
Benjamin Robert Sadler, you have pleaded guilty to the charge against you, and it is now our duty to inquire into mitigating circumstances in order to pass a fitting sentence on you. We know what you did. We now need to find out what kind of man you are, whether you were led astray by others or whether you accept full responsibility for your own actions.
I accept full responsibility myself.
Mr. James?
Now, Mr. Sadler, how old are you?
24.
And what do you do for a living?
I'm studying to be a civil engineer.
How long have you been studying?
At college. 5 years. This is my final year.
And why did you leave college before qualifying?
Well, I discovered that there were more important things to do than just earn a living.
What did you do when you left college?
I went into hiding.
Where?
I can't tell you that.
Well, were you with friends?
I may have been.
You do realize that if you make a full and honest confession before this court, that will be taken into consideration when sentence is passed.
Yes.
Are you prepared to tell the court who your friends are?
No.
You're prepared to sacrifice your own liberty, possibly even your life, for them?
Yes.
Have you been offered any inducement while awaiting trial to betray these friends?
I was told that if I cooperated fully, I might not have to be tried at all.
What would happen instead?
I'd be rehabilitated in a state hospital.
And what did you reply?
I said no.
Now, this act of sabotage, can you tell the court why you performed it?
I still believe, that the reservoir is having chemicals pumped into it that are harmful.
You still believe this?
Yes, I do.
Have you carried out any tests on water in or from that reservoir to ascertain the truth of your belief?
No, but I've seen the results of such tests.
And what were these results?
Large quantities of tranquilizing drugs are being pumped into the water supply.
Where did you get this report?
A friend of mine analysed some water.
And what was the chemical nature of this tranquilizer?
Well, I don't know. I'm not a chemist. But I saw the results of the analysis.
Where did you get the water from?
Just turned on a tap.
Are you suggesting that everyone in the country is being tranquilized by the water they drink?
I don't know about everyone in the country, but the people in the Stackpool area certainly are.
Mr. James?
And what did you decide to do about your discovery?
Blow up the plant, stop the chemicals, and let everyone know what was going on.
Did this involve you in any risk?
Answer in words, Mr. Sadler.
Well, I wouldn't be here now if it wasn't risky.
Did you intend harm to anyone?
No.
Did you intend to kill the guard who died?
No, absolutely not.
Are you sorry that he died?
Yes, very much so. Our intention is to help people, to preserve life, not to harm them or kill them at all.
In everything that you did, you were in fact motivated by a high regard for others, by a desire to help your fellow men.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Sadler.
Any questions, Mr. Gordon?
No, Mr. President.
Mrs. Rudd? Major Burney?
Yes. Where did you obtain the hand grenade?
From friends.
When you were apprehended, I understand that you were also in possession of an automatic pistol and a throwing
I
knife.
never had a gun.
No doubt these were intended to help your fellow men too.
I never had a gun.
You deny the gun.
And the knife.
They were no doubt planted on you after your arrest.
I never had a gun or a knife.
Can you explain why the police should have wished to plant a gun on you?
To make me seem like a criminal.
You had been arrested at the scene of a violent crime for which you are quite clearly responsible. Do you really think they had to make you seem like a criminal?
To make what I'd done seem worse.
To make your vicious murder of a guard seem worse?
Well, you obviously think of me as a criminal.
I think of you at this moment, Mr. Sadler, as a self-confessed murderer.
He's no killer. That boy wouldn't hurt a fly. It's all a mistake.
I heard it from his lawyer's clerk. He changed his plea to guilty.
Can't be guilty. I know Rob. Have you ever known him want to hurt or harm anybody?
Maybe not, but I think it's better to admit what you've done and then tell them why. Use the court as a platform.
He's pleading guilty. What are they doing in there now?
Settle, please.
What am I meant to say? I don't know anything.
Don't tell them anything.
Come along now, please, Mr. Sadler.
Hello, David.
Was that Robbie's father?
Yes.
I've never met him. How's he taking it?
He doesn't know what's going on.
Nor do I, not really.
What are you going to say?
I don't know. I don't know what they're going to ask me.
You didn't make a statement.
No. They just turned up one day. Did I know Rob? Would I come and give evidence?
Evidence of what?
They didn't say.
Do you know something?
No. I'm just going to tell them about what he's like. What Robbie's like.
Not about his politics. You mustn't say anything about that.
I don't know anything about his politics, Sally.
You what?
Had he never shown any signs of political discontent?
I don't think so.
Well, had he or had he not?
We never talked about it much. Politics, that is. But I wasn't interested. Didn't seem much call to talk about it.
You'd never heard him discussing politics with his friends?
No, not that he had that many friends. Apart from Sally, of course. At least I didn't meet them.
Well, when he first disappeared from home, you failed to report his absence to the police. Why was that?
Well, I didn't want to get him into any kind of trouble. He'd wandered off once or twice before. But he always came back. Well, he didn't have to report till the end of the week, so I thought he'd come back like before.
He'd been absent on mysterious trips before?
Mysterious? You know what they're like when they're growing up. They like to go off on their own, brood, write poetry, that kind of thing.
But not stay away all night?
Never more than a couple of nights.
Well, what about his work? How could he possibly keep up with his quotas if he was wandering off for 2 or 3 days writing poetry?
He used to catch up, I don't know. I didn't like to interfere. Ever since his mother died, he's been inclined to brood. I thought it best to let him get it out of his system.
Did you not know that it was illegal for a student to spend a night away from home without a permit?
Technically.
Thank you, Mr.
No,
Sack.
he never came to any harm and he always got back.
You don't know what moral harm might have been done to him.
I used to ask him where he'd been. He'd just say with friends. Didn't seem any harm in it.
Was there anything else to make you worry that he might be going wrong?
He wasn't going wrong. Not the way I saw it. Just used to get moody, sad and wander off.
And you've no idea who any of these friends might be?
None at all.
And you weren't worried when he didn't show up for some days?
I was. I went round to see Mr. Sadler. He said he'd wandered off again.
Again?
He used to go off occasionally, just for a night or two.
Not with you?
Goodness, no.
Did he sleep with you?
Mr. President.
Sit down, Mr. James.
But, sir, this has...
Sit down, Mr. James!
Is that any business of yours?
Everything that young man has ever done is now the business of this court, Miss Ross. Now, did he sleep with you?
No.
Did he ask to?
No. I would have, though, if he'd have wanted me to.
Why didn't he ask, then?
I don't know. You'd better ask him. I assume because he had other things on his mind.
What kind of things?
He wouldn't talk to me about it. He'd say he didn't want to get me involved.
In what?
He thought the political system was all wrong. He wanted to change it.
He told you that?
Yes.
Did he talk about fluoridization at all?
No.
What else did he say about the political system?
Just that he wanted to change it. In his view, elections are a farce as we have them here. And he doesn't think there's any real freedom of speech if anything that ever gets published is put out by a state publishing house.
And you have absolutely no notion where he got these ideas from?
No.
Dr. Donati?
Pass, please.
There you are. Thank you.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I swear by Almighty God so to do.
These are the penalties for perjury before this tribunal. Will you please read them through?
I am aware of the penalties. I have sworn to tell the truth.
Please tell the court who you are.
I am Michael Andrew Donati, Slater Professor of Mathematics at the College for Adult Studies at Stackpool.
And what is your relationship with Benjamin Robert Sadler, whom we see in court here?
I was his teacher in mathematics. I am also his friend.
A friend we haven't seen for far too long.
It's good to see you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
You know, Jane was asking after you only the other day. She'd been reading one of those succinct and cutting articles you don't write enough of.
What article was that?
Oh, I didn't see it, I'm afraid. The ministry dictates pretty much everything I ever get time to read these days. Come sit down, Mike.
How is she?
Jane?
She's a little older. Aren't we all? She here?
No, she's at the flat.
What? This isn't,
Good Lord, no. No, we still have the old flat. This is just my office.
Office?
Well, they give me this place here in the Strand when I'm working in town. My main office is still out in the country.
That ominous house in the middle of a fortified park.
That's not that bad.
Tell me about Jane. Is she any better?
She's no worse. She's missed you, though. 5 years. It's far too long.
4.
5. 5 next month, I looked it up.
And what have those 5 years done for you? More power? More influence? Who calls you sir now?
Yes, come in. Yes, Miss Brewer.
Lunch is ready, sir.
Mike, do you want to eat?
Yes, please.
Fine. Thank you, Miss Brewer. Wheel it in. Come and sit down, Mike.
It was quite a surprise seeing you there in court. Took a moment to remember.
Remember? Remember me? Your most devoted pupil?
Oh, no. What ministry you're in. Why, you should possibly, conceivably, be interested in one of my errant students.
Oh, well, we'll come to that later.
For a moment, I thought you'd come for me, on my account.
I did.
That almost alarms me.
Well, the papers landed on my table last month. I glanced through them and saw your name. Thank you, Miss Brewer.
I'm not wrong, am I? You haven't changed ministries all of a sudden. You're not at the Ministry of Justice.
Indeed, I'm not.
And then what?
Then tell me about Sadler. What kind of a boy is he?
What's going to happen to him?
It depends. He's changed his plea, did you know that?
I heard. It wasn't exactly brilliantly defended.
Well, the poor chap did his best, but under Section 8, there's very little he could do. The boy was arrested on the scene of the crime. He admitted having committed it. By changing his plea, he throws himself onto the mercy of the court. It was my idea.
I thought it might have been. What kind of mercy do you expect from a buffoon like Major Burney?
Well, he may be a buffoon, but at least he's doing less harm sitting on tribunals than he would be in charge of an anti-riot squad or on curfew patrol.
There's people like Burney that cause riots and make the curfew necessary.
I agree, but what would you have me do? Put all the Burneys under lock and key and let the protesters run the country?
Well, not exactly lock and key.
Well, that is the alternative, but you still haven't answered my question. Tell me about Sadler.
He's a bright lad. A hothead, obviously, or he wouldn't be where he is now.
Couldn't you have restrained him?
Had I known what was going on.
And you didn't know?
No.
Not even a suspicion?
No. You heard me in court.
Well, I was in court.
Not a whisper.
Oh, it's not possible. His father, his girlfriend, his fellow students, even his teacher, and no one suspects until one day up he pops lobbing hand grenades at people. It's not possible.
It happened.
Between the time of his disappearance and the time of his arrest, let's say about 5 weeks, did he try to contact you?
No, I told the court.
Michael, I'm not the court. The tribunal deals in terms of black and white, guilt and innocence, yes and no. I deal in shades, in sfumato, in doubts and whispers.
And you doubt the truth of what I said?
When I said, did he try and contact you, I didn't say, did he try to come and see you. I know he didn't.
How?
Your house was watched, as were the houses of all his other friends.
Then you know.
Yes, but one day another of your students might have said to you, oh, by the way, Rob Sadler sends his regards. Something, anything.
Nothing.
You see why it matters?
Absolutely. Had it happened, I would have told the authorities, and the whole tragic situation might have been averted. What is going to happen to him?
I don't know. I'm doing my best to save him. He's potentially valuable to the community. It would be a pity to lose his services, his intelligence, waste his education.
He's potentially incredibly dangerous to the community.
Well, that's what makes him valuable. Look at you. A heretic. A critic of every government we ever have. A rallying point for dissidents. Influential, arrogant, esteemed.
But not dangerous.
That's my point. We harness energy to service.
I never murdered anyone.
You never served in the army.
Look,
every battle can be seen from different points of view. Come in. As you know, I was born in Kenya. My father thought the Mau Mau were vicious murderers. The Africans thought them freedom fighters. You know, violence and terror are instruments of political power just as much as elections. Elections are weapons in a different kind of war, that's all.
You'd say every vote cast was a bullet saved.
I would prefer to think every bullet is a vote of protest.
When can I see Jane?
Shall I carve for you, sir?
No, it's all right. It's all right, Miss Brewer. I'll deal with it. Just leave it. Whenever you like. She'd love to see you.
Has there been any improvement?
She seems very content.
Well, she's always been a happy person.
Yes, but not content. Now she is that too.
Acceptance.
Of the symptoms, not of the disease.
How can I help you?
Sadler trusts you. I know that. Every student you've ever had, including me, has always trusted you totally. Talk to him. Try to get him to cooperate a little. If he will help me, I will help him.
He'll never tell me the name of his friends.
That plant isn't pumping tranquilizers into the water, you know that.
Do I?
It's just another form of voting. You don't like the government, so you blow up reservoirs. I can understand that.
If I asked him to help you, he might grow to distrust me.
Ask him to help himself. Explain the choice.
I'm not sure that I know it.
Sadler does.
Your final decision, Mrs. Rudd?
Definitely.
Major?
Absolutely.
Then that makes it unanimous.
Pretend I'm not here, Mr. President.
That would be difficult.
And I must leave you.
Benjamin Robert Sadler, you have pleaded guilty to murder. This court has no power to vary the sentence for murder at all. It is laid down quite clearly. But the court does have the power to recommend that you be treated with mercy. And we've heard evidence today in mitigation of your offense. You are a young man, and your counsel has argued that you are at the most misguided and not wicked. He has argued, in effect, that your refusal to cooperate with the police should count in your favor. And we've heard the evidence of your father, your friends, your teacher, and your employment officer. But the facts remain. And the facts are that you are a willful and wicked young man whose wanton actions have led to the death in a most terrible fashion of an innocent man. The court is not prepared to recommend mercy in this case.
No, please.
Sit down.
Benjamin Robert Sadler, the sentence of this court is that you be taken from here to a place of detention, and that you be taken from thence to a place of execution not later than 10 days from this date, where you be done to death. Take him down.
Be upstanding in court.
Clear the court, please. Move along now, please.
What do they mean, done to death?
They never say they're shot, but they never say so.
What about an appeal? They can't just... It wasn't a proper trial.
Did you expect one?
Move along now, please.
Is that all just that and it's over?
It wasn't a trial.
It was a sham.
I'll be able to see him.
I don't know.
Well, somebody must know. Where have they taken him?
Mr. Sadler, Miss Ross, may I say how sorry I am?
Who are you?
My name is Frederick. I hold a watching brief for the Ministry of the Interior in all these kind of trials.
That was a proper trial.
I must say I partly agree with you. Perhaps you could spare me a little of your time.
I'll leave you, Bill.
You too, Miss Ross.
Me?
Yes, you.
Why me?
Anyone that can help save him from a firing squad. It's impossible, Mr. Sadler, for your son to have done what he did on his own. Now, if we can track down some of the others, we can save him.
I don't know any others.
You don't think you do, but they must have come to the house.
That's what the police said. They asked me to write out a list.
That?
Yes.
Mr. Sadler, I realize that you must have been anxious not to incriminate anyone, but now it's a question of doing anything we can to save his life.
I will, anything I can.
Not just in the 5 weeks after his disappearance, but before that, over the last year, since he took to this wandering off on his own. There must be more than that.
I know I should have reported him, but I didn't want to get him into trouble.
Report him for what?
going off on his own. I just thought he had a girlfriend.
Mr. Sadler, people who came to the house, people who may have seemed quite innocent to you, but were in fact recruiting agents, sounding him out, trying to find out what he thought about things.
Well, he didn't come back on his own.
Look, think back. When did this wandering off, when did it first start?
Just after his mother died.
When?
5 years ago, more or less.
About the same time as he first went to college?
That's it. She died just after he got his scholarship. She was so pleased.
Mr. Sadler, ever since then, anyone that came to the house, anyone that came quite often and then stopped, anyone that you haven't seen since?
I don't know.
We haven't got much time, Mr. Sadler. I have to put in a recommendation for a commutation within the week or the minister won't be able to help.
Well, there were some whose names I don't remember, some I never did know by name.
Try to remember them all. If you didn't know their names, try to describe them. I don't want to hurry you.
I'll see what I can do.
We'll send someone round to your house tomorrow.
Shall I be able to see him?
Just at the moment, it is more important that you concentrate on that list. When you have it finished, I'll arrange for you to visit him.
Thank you very much.
Good night, Mr. Sadler. Miss Ross, please.
Thank you.
Has Dr. Donati arrived yet? Would you ask him to wait downstairs, please?
Can I get you a drink?
No, thanks.
Won't you sit down?
How can I
You tell me, Miss Ross, how can you what?
help to save Robert's life?
By being honest with me, by cooperating wholeheartedly.
In doing what?
I believe that some of Sadler's accomplices, some of his fellow terrorists may be known to you. You may not know that they are terrorists, but you may suspect. I want you to tell me their names.
I can assure you I have absolutely no
Please,
idea.
Miss Ross, we haven't much time. If you will agree to help me, I will make sure that the execution is stopped. And I cannot guarantee it at this moment, but if we track down enough of his accomplices, I am fairly certain I can get a reprieve. Of course, he'll have to serve a sentence in prison. In return for your cooperation, it will be a soft prison. You will be allowed to visit him once a month in the usual way. And if he behaves himself, he will be out in a few years, still a young man, and I can predict a perfectly happy future for you both together.
Betray him in order to save him?
No. Betray only your own suspicions. No one need ever know where the information came from.
I can't help.
Miss Ross, I am very serious in warning you that you are virtually his only chance now.
I'd help if I could, but I can't. I knew he was mixed up in something, but he kept me out of it. He wouldn't let me know. I can't help.
I think you can. The firing squad is final, Miss Ross.
Can I see him?
If you mean, can you get his permission to tell me what I need to know, then I shouldn't bother.
If I see him, he might tell me something. I mean it. I really don't know anything.
Dent.
Sir.
Miss Ross is to be allowed to visit Sadler. Please make the arrangements. Oh, and tell Dr. Donati that I'm ready.
Yes, sir.
Go home. Wait for someone to contact you.
I can't promise anything.
That's a pity, Miss Ross.
When shall I see you again?
We'll send a car for you tomorrow.
Dr. Donati's waiting downstairs now, and your wife phoned, sir. She wants to know if you're going to be home late.
Right, well, tell her I'm on the way. Oh, and don't mention Dr. Donati's name. I want to see her face when she sees him.
I shan't mention it.
Fine. Well, Miss Ross, I will leave you with Mr. Dent. Good night.
Good night.
This way, Miss Ross.
Hello, you.
Hello.
Brought a visitor for you.
Michael!
Jane.
Oh! Oh! It's wonderful to see you, darling. How clever of you. I was feeling depressed. I feel much better now. Oh, dear Michael, it's so good to see you. Why don't you ever come and visit us anymore?
Because I live in Stackpool and you live here and the twain never seem to meet.
Well, then what are you doing here now?
Well, I'm a witness in a case.
A case?
The boy, darling, who tried to blow up the reservoir.
Oh, I should have known he was one of yours. You always attracted the mad and the dangerous.
Is that how I got you too?
Let me get you a drink, darling.
My usual, please.
You have such a thing as wine? It's about all I drink nowadays.
Burgundy?
Perfect.
I'll get it. I won't be a minute.
Sit down, Michael. Tell me how you are.
More to the point. How are you?
As you see me.
No better?
No worse. The pain stopped almost entirely.
Paul?
He knows everything there is to know. It wouldn't be fair to him otherwise.
You look tired.
Yes, I am tired. I get bored, and that makes me tired. I can't read.
Why not?
I mean, I get bored with reading, and there's nothing much else to do. And then I fret, and I take it out on him.
You don't get out?
Oh, not much, no. The constant cold, it eats into me. And it isn't fair on Paul to
You
expect...
mean I get so involved in my work I never have time to take you anywhere?
How can you, darling? You're out till all hours every night, and you leave at 7 o'clock every morning.
Well, I shouldn't. If I were a decent husband, I'd refuse the work, stay at home or keep you company.
You'd go mad, and you'd probably drive me mad, too.
Very nice. I didn't know you could get any of that anymore.
You can't. I've had it since it was first bottled.
It must be worth a fortune. I couldn't
Oh,
possibly...
Michael, don't be silly. When do we ever have anything to celebrate?
Thank you. Well,
there you are, then. You open it. I'll get Jane a drink.
What happened to the boy?
Sentenced to death.
Death?
He threw a hand grenade at a guard, blew him to smithereens.
Yes, but even so. What kind of a boy is he, Michael?
Bright, intelligent. Just the kind of son you and Paul might have had. That was very tactless. I'm sorry.
No, it's all right.
Here.
Thank you.
To old friends.
To you, Michael.
Next time, let it not be so long.
That poor boy. He must be feeling awful.
Will I be allowed any visitors?
Yeah, of course you will. Many as you like. Matter of fact, we've got one for you tomorrow morning.
Who?
Miss Ross, I believe.
Sally? Are you sure?
Thought I'd cheer you up a bit. I saw the name on the file just before I came on duty. Your friend, Mr. Frederick, arranged it.
Frederick? Who's Frederick?
Well, maybe I was wrong.
On your feet, Sadler. What's going on? Don't you know? No? All right, lads.
Hey, you can't do this!
We saw
Not
this.
for another 10 days! What's going on?